Hello there everyone, just another Maya quick tips video for you. Of course this is probably the second one I've done this week in response to some of the requests that are coming through in the video request area. And this one was for just creating some lazy reflective materials, or quick reflective materials inside of Maya. Now of course, you know, my recommendation is that all pre-visitors should use hardware 2.0 because we get to see, of course, you know, all of our graphics in real time, much like we might see inside of a game engine. Yes, certainly not advanced as something like Unity or Unreal 4 or Unreal Engine 4. But that doesn't matter. We still got more than enough stuff here to kind of make a scene look good. So what I've done here is I've mocked up a little sort of beach diorama just quickly with one kind of key reflective surface in here. So let's take a look at what this looks like to begin with. So I'm just going to zoom out of this. And you see we'll get rid of our text and then we'll go back to our main window. So this here is just a little bit of work. You can see quite low poly setup, and I'm basically using very cheap materials. I'm using colors rather than actual textures most of the time. But pay attention to the surface of the pool. You can see here that it's got this beautiful kind of shimmer where you can kind of catch the reflections of clouds. Oddly enough, there's actually no clouds in this scene, but that's okay, we kind of get the point. This is just one of those lazy kind of quick tips which is about faking it to make it, which is the whole point in previs. So let's go through that process of making it, and of course you can download this demo file and you can do whatever you want with it. I don't mind, it's yours for free, I don't really care. It's my teaching material, I can do what I want with it, and I say you can have it. So if you want to take it and do something else with it, that's perfectly fine. But in the meantime, we're just going to go back to it, and we're going to switch all these things on. So let's switch our lights on. Let's take a look at our scene, and let's switch our textures on as well. I believe that should do it. Okay, so this is the basic scene. I'll give you a quick, auto shutdown as usual every time I try to use this headset. There we go. Shutdown disabled. So this is a quick scene breakdown. I'm just going to quickly zoom out. You can see there's not much here. It's a giant sphere that's being turned inside out. It's incandescent. It could give out this kind of constant blue background effect. This here beautiful kind of sandy beach effect is actually really simple. It's just a plane. It's a simple plane where the edges are of course painted completely transparent, and then of course towards the center I've used a high yellow. And essentially that kind of comes towards the end. So basically it's vertex shading. It's making that look like that, and of course it's lovely and smooth, and of course it just has that lovely floating island effect, which is exactly what I was looking for at the time. Excuse my phone. And the rest of the scene, which you can see is all available in the outliner. Hopefully I've renamed everything correctly. But we've got, of course, a couple of little sort of trees. We've got a little tiki hut, and of course we have our beautiful pool here, and of course there's a little bouncing ball on it. Now, if I've done everything right, you should be able to see that this surface here, let me just switch on my shadows as well, has a reflective quality to it. I just noticed that it's not actually showing, which maybe that's a good thing because then we can actually build it from scratch. I'm just wondering if I have done something strange to it. No, material water is definitely there, so that should be showing. Let me just quickly double check I haven't disabled anything. So textures are definitely switched on, hardware textures at least. Lights are on, hardware textures are on. I think it's just maybe being really hard to see, or I've accidentally deleted it already. In any case though, we can go ahead and make a reflective material nonetheless. So let's go about it. Okay, so in this pool you can actually see I've just separated this out as a mesh, and you can do what you want with that. Okay, so you know that is just a flat plane that matches the same shape as the pool. You'll notice that it's giving a shadow off, and of course one of the first things that I might want to do is actually disable that shadow, but I don't think it's actually that bad. But I know that given the nature of what we're trying to do today, I might go to mesh pool water and look for the render stats issue, and then obviously go, you know, I don't want it to receive shadows and I don't want it to cast shadows, because it should obviously be a transparent surface that catches the light of the water. And okay, so nothing much going on here. And then what I'm going to do next is assign a new material. So I'm keeping this outside of the pool for now. I'm going to hold right click, I'm going to assign a new material, and the first thing I want to do is make sure I'm selecting something that has a sort of reflective quality to it. And there's a couple of things here we can use inside of my as kind of default options here. We don't want Lambert, it's matte, but we can use things like Blend Fong or Fong E. In this case, I think Fong is an advanced and it's an extended version of Fong. So Fong is a beautiful material, so let's add that. And of course, by default, it's just going to catch the light of the scene, which of course is giving it this kind of odd color, and that's fine for now. I just realized my face is extremely bright. We can never get lighting correct in this setup. Not that that matters. So anyway, we've got a Fong material. So the first thing we want to do is obviously rename that, obviously to matte underscore. So obviously matte is signals to me inside anywhere that I find it is I have a material being made. And I'm going to call this water test. Alright. And now we can start assigning some basic attributes to this, okay? So it's we know that it's water, so we probably want to give it a color similar to color of water, so some sort of like aqua blue, something cheesy and something that stands out. This kind of like turquoise color I think looks lovely, and just make sure that it's in there. Next up, we've got our transparency, okay? So this is where things can get interesting. We talked about procedural textures before, but a procedural texture that alters the transparency is one way to go here. But in this case, so I'm just interested in maybe making it a little bit transparent. Of course, we go all the way, it's too invisible. We want to be able to, tell that that water's there still. So I kind of go for about halfway transparency, knowing that I might come back to this later and kind of adjust it, and just kind of compare it to the rest of the pool. So far, nothing crazy going on there. And of course things start getting interesting as we head on down the kind of options available to us. So we know that ambient color of course is all about the shading that receives, and of course being a water surface, we can maybe fake that it's diffusing the light a little bit by kind of just poking that up just a tiny bit. Nothing much, just a little bit. Incandescence, of course, is light giving properties. It's a body of water, so it probably isn't giving light off. So I can leave that alone. Though some people say, obviously if it receives water, it maybe has a little bit of light glow to it. In this case, I'm going to leave it off though. I don't really want to put that in there. Bump mapping, we're definitely going to come back to that later. But in the meantime, what we're going to stick with is looking down here towards the specular shading area. So you can ignore translucence, you can ignore translucence focus, and that's not going to affect us right now. We're worried about the real-time rendering of our hardware 2.0. So specular shading is where things get interesting. So specular, now let's try and angle this a little bit. Now you notice as I turn this around, you'll notice that this surface, because it's a Fong, begins to receive some sort of shine spread on it, okay? Now, we want to change that, okay? So you can see if I play with the roughness here, I can decide how rough or how unrough that material is, and you can see that it decides how much water is being spread across it. Now water tends to be quite shiny, but of course it's a still water, it's a pool, so it'll have a little bit of roughness to it. And of course we can play around with the highlight size as well, and of course being water, it's generally quite large body of highlight size. And of course the specular color as well, and this white, so I think specular color is one I go to next. Pump that up to white, because of course, being in this scene, it probably wants to catch that lovely prickly white light very, very beautifully. And next up we've got reflectivity. Now, inside of hardware 2.0, that's not going to do much. We can put reflectivity up and down here, but it really isn't going to do much for us here. What we definitely want to play though is with the reflected color, and that's where we plug in our super lazy environment color essentially. Now, this is something I'm doing rather simple. If I was taking my time, I would maybe try and take a screenshot of this scene and use that as my reflection, because that can then give the illusion that it's reflecting the scene in real time. Now what we don't want to do is obviously create screen space reflections or ray trace reflections, because most hardware options just don't have that as an availability there. So what's more than good enough is faking reflection. So I'm going to go to reflected color, and I'm going to plug something in there instead. So let's plug in, check our little checker icon for plugins, and of course there are plenty of options here, but you'll notice that there's one called Env textures for environment textures, and there are a number of options here, and I can never really remember which one's my favorite, because I've used them so often throughout but I think environment ball or environment sphere tend to do me pretty well. So let's stick with environment sphere for now. Oh, I think I've done it wrong. But I think we can plug an image in here though. No, that looks fine to me. So Environment sphere, of course, we can control this color. You can see like the way I move that is obviously deciding what's going to plug in there. But actually I want to plug an image in there or a picture. And I've actually got a really kind of cheap and nasty picture just downloaded off the internet. Now obviously, I would normally go and make something myself, but in this case, I'm just trying to do a little small demonstration. So I'm going to click this icon, and this time I'm going to try and look to plug in a file. So I'm clicking file there, and then of course I can now browse with this image name area to my desktop, and then of course pick this clouds picture. You can see it's very realistic and totally not in line with what I'm making here, which is very stylized. But I'm just going to put that in, and of course I can see everything here. And there's a bunch of options below you can use to maybe play around with it a little bit, such as like color balance. How much exposure do you want that to actually have? I tend to actually bring that down a bit because that's extremely bright. So there's a bunch of small controls there which you might want to play with, but that's about it. That's all fine. Now we're not seeing much happening here yet, so I'm just going to have to start changing my angles here in order to see what's really happening. Now as I move around, I can slowly start to see that there is actually a little cloud puff reflecting there, which is exactly what I wanted. So it does look, and there we go. As I come down here, I'm going to select off that. You can see we've got this lovely cloud appearing over that reflection, which is fantastic. So it's just using that picture we've punched in there as a cheap reflection. Now of course I think at this point you probably want to move your angle to kind of match that. And then of course now I'm selecting this again to go back through our options that we had before. So I'm going to go to my tab where I can see my material underscore water test, the one we designed earlier, and then maybe play with the reflectivity here. So like reflectivity obviously decides how much of that image is coming through as a reflection. So I tend to kind of find a decent angle and then kind of make a decision that way. But this is working fine for me, I think. It's subtle and it looks good enough to me. So again, I can play with that, and of course I can play with all the other options that are available to me. For instance, we can play around with that color of the water again. Might want to darken it, or change it to a slightly, different hue. That's fine as well. Maybe put the transparency up or down. I actually bring the transparency down a little bit here. I just want to be able to see underwater. And of course I can do that with the transparency being around about, see a quarter. It also lets me see more of that reflection coming through. And of course this is just all about nudging the reflectivity, and of course those other features that are available. And of course we want this to look like still water. So I'm just going to click off of that, do a little rotation, and of course we can see here that we've got this image that we've downloaded, and you can download a few out there. I'm sure some HDR images as well if you really wanted to create this fake reflection. And it looks fine. It's more than good enough for a pre-visualization. Gives us the impression that that is a shiny water surface, but it is definitely one thing. It's far too smooth. So what we might want to do now is maybe we can maybe interrupt it with a procedural bump map or something. So with this angle here, that looks gorgeous, doesn't it? I want to jump into it. So I'm going to select that material again. I'm going to go to my material water test. I'm going to select my bump mapping option instead and put a wee plugin, the wee checkered icon for plugin. And this time I'm going to go to 2D textures and look for something reasonably. I think a fractal might do this, or a noise, but I'm going to pick fractal for now, and we'll see how far this gets us. There is a water option, but I think it gets a little bit complex when you start going there, but you can try it out if you like. But fractal's more than enough. All we're trying to do here is create a procedural black and white image that'll interrupt the surface of the water a little bit. So you'll notice the huge difference as soon as I click this fractal option. It does that. Alright, so our material is still reflective, but it is now so rough that the image is, and the closer I get to it, you'll see how crazy that looks. So we just want to break this up a little bit to make more sense. By default, it'll jump obviously to our bump values, and of course 1 in this case is just far too high, so I think something like 0.05 is a good place to begin to start kind of evening this out. And you can see already it's definitely less intense. It actually looks more like frozen water at this rate. But isn't that interesting, just how that interrupts that? I love that. I think it's gorgeous. I've always been obsessed with bump maps and normal maps and how they work. In any case though, try to get a decent angle so you can see the impact that your changes will make. So I'm just going to select the material one more time here, and then I'm going to see the bump mapping area we plugged in already. I'm going to click the little connection arrow just to kind of open up the fractal variables essentially inside of here. So of course I've got a bunch of options here, and you can see as I pull this up and down, you can see how that changes the surface. And that's a wonderful thing. That's exactly what we're looking for. And of course, being a gentle pool on a cool summer's day, we want this to be relatively calm. So I keep everything relatively simple. And of course, a subtle effect is almost always better. And if you push that bias up high again, it goes into frozen territory. I just want to keep things reasonably simple. And that to me looks more than good enough. Is it a realistic reflection of the area around it? No, not at all. But will it do for a previs? Absolutely, you betcha it will. So if I deselect that now, we can see that we have this really simple reflective water material that looks absolutely fantastic for something that took us no time at all to make. Absolutely brilliant. And of course you can apply that to all sorts of things, you know. And of course in this scene maybe there's a few things that you might want to apply some reflection to, such as these beautiful looking cocktail glasses here. Give it a go and see what you think. In any case though, that file is available to download. Just remember, if you're downloading this file, you'll need to switch on hardware texturing and lighting, and of course you'll probably want to enable things like shadows in order to see what the scene actually looks like. But everything, let's go back to the main window here and give it another play and see if that reflection's coming through just the way we would like it. So there we go. We can see that pool is looking sensational. Whatever, that looks like a strawberry daiquiri in that big glass there. I'd absolutely love a sip of it. Anyway, hopefully that was somewhat useful to you. Play around with all your settings. Remember, it doesn't cost anything to open up a new scene in Maya, make some materials, play around with them and see what sort of things you come out with. In fact, it's really good fun. Maybe not the way you want to spend a Friday night, but good fun nonetheless. I'll see you next time, and thanks for listening.